Hello and welcome. Today, we are jumping into a question that really gets to the heart of how we see the world. It's this epic battle between hard data on one side and, human intuition on the other. Between this feeling of relentless optimism and this deep-seated sense of caution.
So let me ask you, straight up, when you look at everything that's going on, do you feel like humanity's best days are still on the horizon? Or do you get this nagging feeling that maybe we've already peaked? It's a huge question, and it's at the center of a really fascinating intellectual showdown.
And to really get to the bottom of it, we're going to break down a famous monk debate. This is where they pitted four of today's sharpest minds, two scientists, two humanists, against each other to hash out this very question.
So on one side, you've got the argument for progress, and they are armed with cold, hard data. And on the other side, you have the case for caution, which is all about the messy, unchanging truths of human nature. This is way more than just a debate. It's a fundamental clash of worldviews.
Let's meet the teams, shall we? Arguing for team progress, we've got cognitive scientist Steven Pinker and science writer Matt Ridley. Their whole case is pretty simple. Just look at the facts. The data proves the world is getting better. But arguing for team caution are philosopher Alain de Botton and author Malcolm Gladwell. And their response? All the external progress in the world doesn't mean a thing if you can't fix the permanent flaws inside the human heart.
Okay, first up, let's hear from the optimists. Steven Pinker kicks things off, and he doesn't start with feelings or opinions. Nope, he comes armed with charts, with graphs, with data. His point is that by almost any way you can objectively measure it, life on Earth has, quite literally, never been better.
In fact, Pinker lays out 10, count them, 10 key areas as solid proof. He's arguing that over the last couple of centuries, we've made these unbelievable, measurable gains in everything from how long we live and how much we earn to our safety, our rights, and even how smart we are. Let's dig into a couple of examples.
So let's start with the most basic thing of all, life itself. Just try to wrap your head around the scale of this change. Only 150 years ago, which is not that long in the grand scheme of things, the average person on Earth lived to be about 30. 30! Today, that number has more than doubled to over 70. Just think about everything packed into that one number. All the improvements in medicine, food, public health. It's incredible.
Now, okay, what about money? Prosperity. Well, 200 years ago, a staggering 85% of the world's population lived in what we'd call extreme poverty. I mean, almost everyone. Today, that number has absolutely plummeted to under 10%. We're talking about billions of people lifted into a better life.
And peace? I know. With the daily headlines, this one feels counterintuitive, right? But the data shows a world that is dramatically less violent. This period we're in, since 1945, with 0 wars between the big global powers, that has literally never happened before. By this metric, we are living in the most peaceful era our species has ever known.
But is that the whole story? I mean, all those charts look great, but let's flip the coin and hear the counter-argument. Philosopher Alain de Botton steps up and basically says, hold on, all this data completely misses the point. He thinks external progress doesn't automatically equal internal happiness.
And de Botton uses this brilliant example, Switzerland. I mean, think about it. On paper, by all of Pinker's metrics, Switzerland should be paradise on Earth. It's peaceful, it's wealthy, it's healthy. But, he asks, is it a utopia? Of course not. People there still suffer from envy, anxiety, heartbreak, and despair. And why is that? Well, he argues it's because all the external progress in the world can't fix what's going on inside our heads.
He says that this shiny, data-driven optimism overlooks 4 permanent, unfixable truths about being human. First, having more knowledge doesn't stop us from being foolish. Second, having more wealth doesn't cure our envy. Third, peace between countries doesn't get rid of our capacity for cruelty. And fourth, well, no matter how good medicine gets, we all still have to face our own mortality.
And the core of his argument really comes down to this powerful idea, relative deprivation. It basically says our happiness isn't about our objective situation. It's about how we see our situation compared to everyone else. In a world of social media, where we're constantly comparing our lives to others, you can have a society that gets richer and richer, but people can actually feel more envious and inadequate. Progress, he's saying, just keeps raising the bar for what we feel we deserve.
And that brings us right to the heart of this entire debate. See, it isn't just about whether the future is going to be good or bad. It's about a much deeper question.
how should we even measure well-being in the first place?
And this is really what it all boils down to. You've got team progress, and they're measuring the world outside of us, our objective material conditions. Then you've got team caution, and they're measuring the world inside of us, our subjective emotional reality. One side is asking, how much has our world gotten better? The other is asking, have we gotten any better? And, as you can see, they come up with completely different answers.
So now that we've heard from both sides, the final verdict? Well, it's really up to you. Where do you land on this? Are you with the data-driven optimists, or do you side with the philosophically cautious?
So we'll leave you with this final thought. When we ask that big question, are humanity's best days ahead of us or behind us, what actually matters more? Is it the progress we can neatly plot on a chart? Or is it the anxieties and the feelings that we still carry around in our hearts? Ultimately, which of those two stories do you think will define our future?
So here's a big question for you. Is the future going to be better than today, or are we kind of headed for a disaster? It's honestly one of the most fundamental things we can ask. And today we're going to dive deep into a really fascinating debate that puts those two worldviews head to head. But before we jump in, just take a second. What's your gut feeling? When you look out at the world today, do you see progress? Do you see potential? Or do you mostly see danger and decline? Just kind of lock that answer in your head. We'll see if it changes. Okay, let's meet the players in this debate. In the optimist corner, we've got psychologist Steven Pinker and author Matt Ridley. And squaring off against them for team pessimist, we have philosopher Elaine de Botton and writer Malcolm Gladwell. I mean, this is a real intellectual heavyweight match over the entire direction of humanity. First up, let's hear the case for optimism. And look, their argument isn't just based on some kind of blind faith or wishful thinking. No, it's all rooted in hard data and a deep belief in our ability to innovate our way out of problems. This quote from Matt Ridley really gets to the heart of their argument. It's this idea that our perception of the world is totally skewed. Think about it. A plane crash makes global headlines, right? But the millions and millions of flights that land safely every single day, that's not a story. So this nonstop fire hose of bad news makes us feel like everything is falling apart, even while slow, steady, positive change is happening all around us. And the optimists, they've got the receipts to back this up. While all the crises are grabbing the headlines, if you look at the actual data, you see this incredible story of progress. Child mortality rates, they've absolutely plummeted. And check this out, economic growth in places like Ethiopia and Mozambique has been over 10% a year. That's the same kind of growth we saw in Asia a few decades back. For optimists, these numbers aren't just anecdotes. This is the real story of what's happening. The optimists also want us to remember our history of, well, panicking. Remember the population bomb in the 70s? Or the constant fear of running out of oil? For decades, the story was, we only have 30 years of oil left. And guess what? They're still saying it today. We worried about acid rain, about a giant hole in the ozone layer that would never heal. And every single time, human innovation found a solution. This all comes down to a powerful idea called creative destruction. It's the engine of progress. The theory is that constant innovation naturally tears down old ways of doing things to make room for newer, better ones. They argue that just like we solved those past problems, we'll solve today's. I mean, get this. With things like advanced hydroponics, we could theoretically feed the entire planet from an area the size of Ontario, Canada. That's the kind of problem solving they're betting on. And finally, the optimists have a warning for us. Stop romanticizing the past. You know how we tend to remember our first love and forget all the awkward, terrible parts? It's kind of like that with history. By almost every single objective measure you can think of, health, poverty, violence, the past was a much, much more brutal and difficult place to be alive. But of course, that's only half the story. The pessimists hear all of this and say, that's great, but you're looking at completely the wrong things. They argue that the very nature of the dangers we face has changed in a way that is just terrifying. Okay, the pessimist's entire case really hangs on this one crucial difference. They'll actually agree with the optimists on one thing. Yeah, The quantity of everyday risks, like dying from an infection, has gone way down. But, and this is a huge but, the quality of risk has skyrocketed. We've basically traded a world with lots of small dangers for a world with a few truly catastrophic, civilization-ending ones. So what kind of risks are we talking about? Well, things like a digital 9/11, a cyber attack that takes down a whole nation's power grid, or systemic failures, like what happened at Fukushima, where one disaster triggered another and another. We've got terrorist groups using simple smartphones to coordinate devastating attacks. And maybe the most chilling of all is accidental Armageddon. Back in 1983, a Soviet officer named Stanislav Petrov saw a warning that the US had launched nukes, but his gut told him it was a system glitch. He was right. He single-handedly stopped World War III. And the pessimists ask a terrifying question. Can we really count on being that lucky every time? The way the pessimists see it, all this optimism about science and progress is just a modern form of hubris. You know, that dangerous, excessive pride that always led to the hero's downfall in all those Greek tragedies. They worry that by being so confident and ignoring how badly things could go wrong, we're setting ourselves up for that exact same kind of fall. Malcolm Gladwell sums up the whole argument with this really powerful metaphor. He says, look, maybe progress has removed some of the bullets from the gun, but reducing the number of bullets from 100 down to 50 doesn't make it safe to play Russian roulette. As long as there is even one bullet left in that chamber, pulling the trigger is an existential gamble. The optimists are celebrating fewer bullets, the pessimists are screaming that we're still pointing the gun right at our own head. So we've got these two very powerful, very convincing, and completely opposite visions of the future. But what if there's a third option? A theory that says both sides are kind of missing the point. It suggests we're not heading for a better or worse version of today, but for something completely different. Yeah, this new perspective basically argues that our entire idea of progress, the thing this whole debate is about, is actually coming to an end. The idea has a pretty wild name, neo-medievalism. Now, I know what you're thinking, the Middle Ages, but hang with me. The theory is that the modern era, which has been driven by the mantra more, faster, farther, more rationally, is basically hitting a wall. And what comes next might actually look a lot more like the Middle Ages. Less centralized power, more focus on local communities, and an end to this obsession with constant growth. So this would mean a fundamental flip in our values. The modern world's push for more and faster would be replaced by a neo-medieval desire for a slower pace. The push for farther and global would give way to closer and local, and the logic of pure rationality and efficiency would be replaced by a logic of tolerance. So what does this actually look like in practice? Well, first, living slower. This could mean people start their main careers later, maybe around 30, after getting a broader education, but they also work for more years overall. Second, living closer. This suggests a big pushback against globalization, with power and economic activity moving away from big central governments and back to local regions. And third, living more tolerantly. This means we'd rely less on pure, cold reason to solve problems, and more on things like art and culture to build bridges between different groups. Okay, so there you have it. You've got the data-driven case from the optimists, you've got the stark warning about catastrophic risk from the pessimists, and you have this wildcard alternative of a neo-medieval future. So after all that, who actually won the debate? Let's look at the vote. Get this. Before the debate even started, 71% of the audience already considered themselves optimists. After hearing all of the arguments, that number actually ticked up a little bit to 73%. So it seems that in the end, the case for progress, even with all the real dangers that the pessimists pointed out, managed to win the day, albeit by a pretty slim margin. You know, it all reminds me of that old saying. The pessimist often sounds smarter, more serious, and gets all the credit for being a deep thinker. But it's the optimist who actually goes out and builds things, takes risks, and at the end of the day, creates progress. Maybe you need both, right? You need the pessimist to spot the icebergs, but you need the optimist to actually steer the ship. And that brings us right back to where we started, with you. After hearing all of this, has your own perspective shifted at all? When you think about what's coming, are you going to look at it through the lens of data-driven optimism, the cautious warning of pessimism, or this idea of a completely different neo-medieval era on the horizon? Which lens will you use? The choice is yours.